Hello everybody, and today I'm here to talk to you guys about a book that I've just finished, which is The Rights of the Reader by Danielle Pennac. This is a relatively short book. It is just like 180 pages long, I believe. For me it was a little bit difficult to find it. No, I couldn't find it on Amazon, on Kobo, or at my local library, or at least not the English version, and at least not the ebook version. I didn't actually check whether they had a physical book in the library perhaps, but so I ended up finding it at archive.org, where you can, if you make an account, you can read it there for free. But so yeah, this is a book written by Danielle Pennac. I have read a Danielle Pennac book before, which was about his days as being a teacher, because I was doing my studies to become a teacher at that point in time. It was obligatory reading, so I didn't necessarily want to read more by Danielle Pennac because I do associate him with obligatory reading, which is very funny considering what this book is actually about. But it is one of the favorite books of a colleague of mine, so I did put it on my one to read a few years ago, and for TBR Spin this month this one came up. So I want to be talking about the rights of the reader that he introduces. So I'm gonna be ignoring about 150 pages within this book, because this book starts off with a whole sort of like exploration of the way that we teach children how to read and the way that we teach them literature, and a plea for changing things and for trying to go back to the essence of reading, to the enjoyment of devouring a story without the obligation to formally analyze it, to formalize your opinions about it, to give summaries and all of those things which seem to be at least reducing the enjoyment of literature that young people have, because it makes it seem like a chore, whereas what we're trying to foster is a love for literature. And so he is pleading for another way of going about things. But the section that I want to be talking about is the final section, which is the section that is called after the name of the book, which is 10 Rights of the Reader. And I thought we could go through those and see, kind of like modernize them to the modern day, because this book is definitely written at a very different time compared to the bookish landscape that we're currently seeing, because of the invention of ebooks, because of the invention of audiobooks, but also from the perspective of being on booktube, whether it is being a person who is producing content for booktube or whether somebody who is consuming booktube, because I do think that being in the bookish sphere also changes certain aspects of reading, changes the way we read, changes what we're reading, and so I do want to kind of look at reading through that lens as well, look at these 10 rules and kind of see what my thoughts are about them when it comes to the way that I read currently. So I do invite you all to I want to open it. I do invite you all to give your opinions down below in the comment section as well, and tell me, is there a further right that needs to be added to this list? I definitely am going to be adding one. So the first right is the right not to read. So the right to decide that reading is not for you, that you do not take joy out of reading, and that reading, while an ideal that is highly valued in our society, can also be something that is just not for you and that you don't want to take part in. I also want to see that a little bit differently in terms of booktube and the bookish community. When I was not on booktube yet, when I didn't even know about the existence of booktube, when I was just a teenager who was just purely picking up books because I loved reading, there will have most likely been a lot of times in which I didn't read on a day, or I didn't read maybe even for a few weeks, for a few months, because another hobby was taking my attention. And I feel like being part of the bookish community and the consumption rate of books that happens on booktube, which I'm also a part of, like I'm a slow reader, so my consumption rate is pretty low, but still compared to the average reader it is pretty damn high. Being exposed to this community in which there is so much much reading being done and we're always talking about all the things that we still want to get read, can create this sort of like need or this feeling that you need to read all the time, because if you're not reading, then that is just time that you could have spent reading, that you could have put towards completing another book. And I'm definitely not saying that that is everybody's reaction to being in the bookosphere. I definitely do think that there are a lot of people who can balance this out a lot better than I personally do, though I feel like I'm getting to a very nice pace with this as well. But the right not to read, I would also interpret as being the right to only pick up a book when you're feeling like it, to put down a book when you're not feeling like it in that point in time, to spend a few days without reading. And this is also where like algorithms get in the way, because I definitely notice that, you know, I have a Storygraph account. I want to keep my streak of reading pages every single day. So like if I don't read a page on a day, it means that my streak on Storygraph is broken. So definitely this is something that has come into play. That definitely wasn't the case back then. You know, I will think that this will have been like the very exceptional being who was like writing down their page count every single day in a notebook or something like that. This is something that is very recently introduced, the idea of like logging your pages every single day and creating these streaks. And yes, this is a motivational tool in order to help you read more, in order for you to achieve goals, but it also becomes a stress factor. And so I do believe the right not to read is also the right to decide that you don't have to be reading all the time. It doesn't make you less of a reader if you don't read every single day. It doesn't make you less of a reader if there are months in which you're not reading at all. So that is the first right. Second right is the right to skip. This is a controversial one, and definitely one that I also kind of feel that I struggle with, and I would find I'm not in the camp of skipping, but I do feel like people have the right to skip. So the idea basically being that if there are certain passages that aren't working for you, you can skip ahead and move on to the next passage. The best example I can give for this, I guess, is my mother, who read War and Peace, but she skipped most of the war sections. If you read War and Peace, that's like half of the book or something like that. And so, yes, I do definitely think that this can very greatly induce enjoyments in people, like skipping the sections that aren't working for them. But for me personally, that's a hurdle to overcome, the idea of not consuming every single word on the page. Though I will admit that when I'm listening to an audiobook, for example, this is naturally happening because my brain tends to wander on certain audiobooks, and so there are definitely times in which I'm listening to an audiobook and I will have mentally skipped a few sentences because my brain was just thinking of something else and wasn't able to multitask on both things. And then I'm like, oh wait, I'm listening to the audiobook, and I refocus on it, so I've actually skipped a section there. I'm listening when I'm on the bicycle, so I cannot just like go back a few sentences and re-listen. No, that has gone at that point in time. So with audiobooks it is definitely happening, and when it is for like minutes on end, or when I notice that my attention was like fully gone, yes, then I do occasionally go back and re-listen the entire chapter. But other times I just embrace the fact that I've more or less gotten it all, and I don't bother like feeling bad about having skipped something. But with physical reading, this is definitely still like something that I would very much struggle with just doing, which is being like, nah, this chapter isn't working out for me, let me just skip to the next one. No, like this definitely is difficult for my brain to conceive. But I will say that I love the example here of Moby Dick being given. Like, you skip the chapter in which he's talking about every single type of harpoon that's being used, every time a whale was described in the history of literature and all those things. Moby Dick definitely lends itself to skipping, but yes. Because if I would have skipped Moby Dick, then yes, that like I definitely would have enjoyed it more, I guess, because in principle the story isn't bad, it's just that there's so much side chapters in there that are boring, super boring. But then of course my brain would also really struggle with considering that as completed. I would struggle to say that I've actually read Moby Dick because I would have only read like half of it. So yes, I do give people the right to do that, but personally, nah, that ain't happening. Third one, and this one goes out to my friend Kitty, you have the right not to finish a book. This is a big hurdle for a lot of people, and I will admit that this is somewhat of a hurdle to some extent for me still, and a few years back it definitely was a hurdle. Like if I started a book, if I didn't like decide in the first few pages that it wasn't really working out for me, then I would almost never not finish the book, you know? And even then, like if I would, a lot of times when the first few pages are not working out for me, I would push on further because I'd be like, yeah, but maybe it's just the beginning, I need to get into the story a little bit further. So ultimately I would always be pushing through until the very end. This did change over the past few years. I have grown capable of DNFing. However, it is definitely not like something I do easily, and there are definitely quite a few books that I still fully finished that afterwards I'm like, I should have just DNF'd. I was not having a good enough time with it, and in the end it became like a 1-star or a 2-star, or maybe even just a dreaded 3-star. But you know, those are books in which I felt at times like I just want to put it away, I'm not enjoying myself with it, but for some reason or another I still push through. And so yes, absolutely, when you're not enjoying a book, when it's not working for you, DNF it, or soft DNF it, you know. Decide that it isn't the time for this book at the moment, put it back, and maybe if 3 years later you still haven't picked this up, that is a time to be like, it's time to unhaul this book. This book is not for me. But so yeah, it is definitely something that I do to some extent still kind of struggle with, you know. But I have, for example, DNF'd in the last 10 pages of a book as well in the last year. So it is something that I am now capable of doing, but it's still a little bit of a struggle. But I would say definitely for people out there who really, really struggle to put down a book, that, you know, if you've gotten through like 60% of the book, you know, and you haven't enjoyed it, like feel free to DNF it, like look up how it ends if that is the hurdle. It is always possible. There are these examples of books that I've finished and the ending has made it worthwhile. However, maybe also think with yourself like, okay, but like even if that is going to be the case, will that have made me go, like, is that worth me struggling through however many pages you need to struggle through to get to the end, in order for me to be at the end be like, oh, that is a really good ending? Like, does that make it worth it to have struggled through all those pages? And hopefully that will help you DNF as well, because, you know, we're always talking about how there are too many books and too little time, and so why are we wasting a lot of our time on books that we feel like we are not enjoying, and that we're only finishing because of some sort of like need to complete, need to finalize. And algorithms can also play into that, or like not algorithms, but sort of like, you know, statistics and stuff like that. On the story graph, if you DNF it, it does not count as a book read. So what I tend to do with it is I tend to mark it as finished and then I mark it as DNF'd, just so that it goes into my statistics. But so yes, this is also some sort of like arbitrary focus on numbers type of mentality that is making it difficult to DNF, because it feels, you know, a DNF feels like wasted time, because you wasted time on the book getting to that point. However, completing a book just because you don't want to DNF is an even further waste of time, so it's very paradoxical. Next up, we have the rights to read it again. Absolutely, reread, guys. Rereading is amazing. And I actually very often skim reread. So for some of the books, I definitely know the sections in which I need to be in order to find particular scenes that I've really enjoyed. And so occasionally, my brain is very associative. So occasionally, like when I'm watching a TV show or something like that, or I'm reading another book, this will remind me of something that happened in the books that I've really enjoyed, or in a movie that I've enjoyed, and then I really want to revisit that scene in that other book or movie or whatever, and I will do so. I will just go back to revisit that particular scene. Sometimes I have to skim read through like 200 pages to get to that particular scene, because I don't fully know where that scene is. In some books by now I know very well where those scenes are. But so yes, absolutely, go for it. Rereading is amazing. It is definitely, as I indicated in the previous write, we have too little time to read too many books, so it can feel like an absolute hurdle to reread something, because you are spending time on something that you've already read, so it doesn't have that sort of feeling of productivity to it that you might have with another book, where it's like, it's one more book off of my shelf, you know, it's one more book off of my want to read list. It's something that I will no longer be wondering about, I will now know. However, it's something you're enjoying, so it isn't about productivity in the case of rereading, though it can be, because you can be rereading in order to get to a later book within the series, of course, but it isn't about productivity. It takes away time from productivity, but it is about pure enjoyment. Your brain is telling you that you crave this particular thing in that point in time, and so just give into it. It will fly by, because you will be like zooming through the book, because you are just like, your brain is craving it. So it's like, you know, like when you're craving potato chips and like the entire bag is gone before you know it, you know. So you'll be flying through it. As you've already read it, you can definitely just like skim read, as I said, to get to those sections that you really enjoy a whole ton. And it's just such a rewarding experience, because it's just like indulging in your favorite things. So absolutely, I'm a big fan of rereading. The fifth right is definitely something that is very applicable to social media, online spaces, and a lot of the debate that happens there. You have the right to read anything. So a typical conversation that happens a lot of the time is sort of like the distinction between good literature and bad literature. You know, trashy literature and highbrow literature. You have the sort of like high lit bros and the girly trashy novel girls, you know. That's sort of like very stereotypicalized and like extreme view of the two type of readers that exist, because definitely there exists more. There are high literature girls, there are low trashy boys, there is a lot of in between. There are people who read a ton of different things, there are people who very much stick to a genre. Reading is personal. It is about what that person enjoys, what that person takes enjoyment out of. And so why the hell would it matter what somebody else is reading? Like, it matters in the sense of you following somebody and so being interested in what somebody else is reading. But why would anybody ever look down upon something that somebody else is reading, or be like, oh, but that person only reads trashy literature? That can be a reason for you not to care about what they're reading, or not to want to follow that person, but that doesn't make them less of a reader. They are still consuming literature, they are still reading the way that you are. It's just that they're reading very different things, and they, you know, who says that they don't have very deep thoughts about that type of literature? Or why is it better to have deep thoughts about literature versus people who are reading for pure enjoyment, for pure escapism? So yes, you can have your values that you assign to literature and that apply to your choices in what you're reading, but placing those labels and those values on other people's reading, yeah, I just don't second that. However, what I do second is exploring literature. Like what I do have a problem with is people who won't explore certain genres, and not because they don't like them. Like, that's perfectly valid. I also don't tend to, like, I don't want to read detective or crime, because that's just something that I know now that I don't like. but not reading something a first time just because you're like, oh yeah, but fantasy is worth nothing, you know, like fantasy is just some imaginative stuff that is like has no value to real life and to real life scenarios. It's just all made up stuff that is purely for entertainment value. It just makes me go like, well, you haven't read a fantasy novel if that is your experience, or you've read one that doesn't meet like what you're looking for. But there's a lot of fantasy literature, like a lot of majority of fantasy literature is absolutely talking about real life situations, real life dynamics between people. So like that opinion of fantasy feels to me like it's grown out of ignorance of what fantasy is. So I would definitely say that yes, you have the right to read whatever, and you still, even though my opinion is that I want you to explore literature, you still have the right to just stick to one alley and never explore the rest. But I would highly encourage a curiosity for broadening your literary scope, for broadening the type of literature you read, or just explore at least. Like, I don't need you to read 5 classics because you have to get into classics, right? No, but if you've never in your life read a classic, I would hope that you would just like give it a try. Like, look for a classic that appeals to the type of literature that you tend to read, or that is like a classic of the genre that you love reading, as a way to broaden your literary horizons and see, because there is just a whole ton of literature out there and potentially you're missing out on a ton of it by just like sticking to one lane. So yeah, that is my appeal, but it is indicated, like, I will not be judging you for like not doing it. I will judge people who have opinions about genres that they clearly don't read, but I will not like be like, oh, that person never picks up a fantasy book, how dare they. Hey guys, so I'm back to film this one clip just because the camera kind of overheated when I was doing the original filming, because it was like one of the warmest days here and my apartment heats up enormously. So yeah, I think I'm going to be cutting off the video here, actually, because I've seen that the clip was already like some 25 minutes or something like that, and I think that that's already more than long enough for a video. So I will be cutting this video into 2 parts. The later part will come, who knows when. I'll definitely be filming it soon, but who knows when I find the spots for it. But definitely let me know down below your thoughts on like the rights that we talked about, but also what do you think should still be added to these rights? What other rights do we as readers have or should give ourselves? But so yeah, that was this video. Hope it was interesting. It's a little bit different from anything else that I typically tend to do. So, but I had a great time with that. As a consequence, I had a great time going through these rights and kind of discussing them and my thoughts about them with you guys. But so yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. See you guys for the next one. Bye!